Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Technical Discussion Group Series 2. My name is Chelsea Calalo as the co-moderator of this event. We will begin the event shortly, but before we begin, I would like to give a short introduction of the event today. Technical Group Discussion Group Series 2 is one of the pre-events of SPE Java Annual Energy Symposium 2022, which is sponsored by ExxonMobil, Schlumberger, Premier Oil, a Harbor Energy Company, and BP, and also supported by SKK Migas and organized by SPE Java Indonesia section. Next. All right, allow me to elaborate the agenda of today's event. First is the opening remarks, followed by SPE membership and annual energy symposium presentation by the committee, speaker and topic introduction, main presentation session by the speaker, photo session, question and answer session, token of appreciation, and lastly, closing remarks. To start off this event, here are several house rules for the participants to keep in mind. First is participants will be muted during the presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat box or just raise your hand to ask directly to the speaker during the question and answer session. And please keep in mind to wait for the moderator to permit you to ask. And there will be a photo session, so please make sure to download and use the virtual background. The link for the virtual background will be shared in the chat box. And also do not forget to fill in the attendance form that will be shared in the chat box by the committee. Now we have come to the next agenda, which is the SPE membership presentation. And this presentation will be delivered by Mr. Tommy Jamail. To Mr. Tommy, the time is yours.
Thank you, Chelsea, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Just give me a little 5 minutes or so. I'd like to go over the importance of membership and why we're all here today. And for those of you that are not members yet, we do encourage you to join us. Obviously, you can take advantage of a lot of benefits. But looking forward and continuing your membership, and for those of you that have yet to renew your membership, we also encourage you to do that this year. But real briefly, there's no doubt that the last 2 years have been very challenging for all of us. But I do believe there is light at the end of the tunnel. It has been proven, though, that SPE members have continued to inspire and also support each other locally, regionally, and globally. So through it all, the society has maintained its commitment to our mission, which is obviously, for providing new opportunities for the industry professionals and bringing a greater value to your membership more than ever before. So if you would go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So just real quickly to kind of go over what are those benefits, for joining SPE. There's several different ones. I mean, again, you would be, within a community of 140,000 plus members. And then, of course, you do have access to several applications that are available or resources, I should say. That is SPE Online. There is also the JPT, One Petro, and so on. So we do encourage you to, definitely get started. You can start by, getting online, joining or renewing. There is an SPE app that you can download for Google or from the Google Play Store for the iPhone OS, and again, get informed. Additional membership benefits that are included, obviously, is the free registration for events that we are in today, and so on. You can have opportunities for volunteering. You can network, and that's the most important thing right there, is networking and getting known in the industry, and so on. So next, please. And lastly, this is the last slide here, just to kind of bring you up to date on some important benefit and changes for 2022. The renewal professional members can choose to pay their membership in a single fee, or they can also do it in quarterly installments. This program actually started back in November of 2021, but we do encourage you to take advantage of that should you wish. I also mentioned earlier about JPT. JPT has also gone into a digital format, a platform now, no longer in a print version. And so you would also get access to that there. And then regarding that renewal process. And when I say renewal, for those existing that have yet to renew, we do encourage you to renew your membership, but you do get a bonus, which is 6 free papers from One Petro that you can download, and that alone is a $48 value. So of course that almost exceeds the membership cost itself. Last but not least, AAPG, for those of you who are not familiar, the American Association of Petroleum Geologists, and SP are planning on a merger. So that's going to expand our community massively. So AAPG and SP are pursuing that Global Petroleum Professionals organization and choice to respond to an evolving energy sector. So again, that makes it stronger together. It's providing a merger of intellectual equals, honoring 2 strong legacies and positioning us for the future, advancing petroleum science and technology, increasing leadership and influence. There's so many advantages. So there will be a voting that will occur, so members can voice their vote on March 4th, I believe. That's going to be coming next month. So a lot of exciting things coming up. Again, if you're not a member, please do join us. If you are a member and your membership has since expired, please renew it. And thank you very much for the time today.
Thank you, Pak Tommy, for the explanation about the membership. And now we will proceed to the SP Java Indonesia Annual Energy Symposium 2022 presentation that will be delivered by Mbak Deva Tasia as the project manager. To Mbak Deva.
Thank you, Chelsea. Okay. Hear my voice? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Deva Tasia Olita. I'm the project manager of SPE Java AES 2022. I would like to give you an overview of our first annual energy symposium. The symposium comprises of numerous pre and main events, which aims to create a place where energy professionals, academia, and regulators could share their knowledge, their expertise with regards to strategies and collaborations required to fuel Indonesia's future. This event is sponsored by ExxonMobil Cepu Limited, Premier Oil, a harbor energy company, BP Indonesia, and Schlumberger. Next, please. This year, we are conducting our first virtual annual energy symposium with the theme Fueling Indonesia's Future Through Energy Collaboration as a support for the Energy Mix 2025 target set by the government. As we know, the oil and gas industry has changed greatly in the past due to energy transition, and it will continue to take place in the coming years, which will affect the future energy production constraints and regulations in the industry. And through this event, there will be many discussions with energy professionals, academia, regulators on how Indonesia is strategizing in preparation to fulfill the target and how oil and gas companies could integrate new sustainable technology in their operation and the energy outlook and potential challenges for the future generation. Next, please. Just to let you know, we have conducted our pre-event programs, which are the series of technical discussion groups, case study competition, and young professional integrated workshop. And this is the schedule for our main event, day 1, which is on 24th of February, 2022. The event itself will start at 9 a.m. Jakarta time. Next, please. And this is the schedule for day 2, 25th of February, and we will begin the event at 1 p.m. Jakarta time. Next, please. For the first day of the main event, in the Grand Plenary Panel session, we will bring together the government representative, oil and gas operators, and academia to discuss the strategy to reshape Indonesia's energy portfolio in preparation to achieve Energy Mix 2025 target. The theme of the Grand Plenary session is reshaping Indonesia's energy future through collaboration. Next, please. Also, we will have 2 technical panel discussions. This is the first one with the theme Innovative Well Optimization Program in the Oil and Gas Industry. Next, and the second one with the theme Carbon Capture Utilization Storage and Reducing Carbon Footprint Initiatives. Next. For the second day of the main event, we will have Women in Energy Talk, which will be delivered by outstanding women speakers with expertise in their field. They will share their technical experience, contributions in the industry, as well as leadership and women empowerment remarks. Next. Also, we will conduct HR Talk, where the session will be delivered by a recruiting team from operator and service company, as well as from academia to discuss the technical capability and skill sets required for future energy task force. Next. And it will be closed with a awarding night. I'm very excited to invite you to take part in our first annual energy symposium. We truly believe by delivering high-quality technical discussions and webinars with great and high-level panelists, we will bring great impact, contribution, and advance further development in Indonesia's energy future. Finally, thank you for joining in our event today. Let's learn and have a fruitful discussion together with our amazing speaker, Kak Sri Mulyani, today. And I'm really looking forward to see you in our main event. Over to you, Chelsea.
Thank you, Mbak Deva, for the explanation about AES 2022. And before we proceed to the main session, once again, let me introduce myself. My name is Chelsea Kalalo as the co-moderator for today's event. And for the moderator, we have Mr. Ahmad Brahmanta, who is a reservoir geologist at Schlumberger. But unfortunately, Mr. Ahmad Brahmanta could not join us in today's event. So in his place, we will have Ms. Mbak Dian Permanasari as the moderator for the question and answer session, and who will guide you throughout the event. And next, here is the profile of our speaker today. Mbak Sri Mulyani is a reservoir geologist at Schlumberger. With the presentation title today, she will talk about novel 5G workflow for fracture modeling and well placement in geothermal field. With the presentation highlights, first, introduction to geothermal system, natural fractures and characterization challenges, innovative 5G fracture modeling workflow, and lastly, results, permeability distribution to select sweet spots for geothermal well placement. And a brief introduction for our speaker today. Mbak Sri Mulyani is a professional geologist with more than 7 years of extensive experiences in oil and gas and geothermal industry. She has various working experiences and skills, including technical engineer and trainer of reservoir simulation and modeling software, geology science and engineer, and geothermal exploration. Mbak Sri Mulyani also has published numerous papers specifically on geothermal reservoir modeling. She has started her career in 2014 until now, and is now a reservoir geologist at Schlumberger. So without any further ado, let's start the main session, which will be presented by Mbak Sri Mulyani, our outstanding speaker for today. To Mbak Sri, the time is yours.
Okay, I will share my screen. Please let me know if you can hear my voice clearly and you can see my slide in a correct place.
Yes, clear, Mbak Sri.
Okay, thank you. Well, so Assalamualaikum, good afternoon, everyone. It's very nice introduction. Thank you, Chelsea. And especially for SPE Java Indonesia, thank you for inviting me. It's my honor to be here. And of course, thank you to the audience for joining this session. Unfortunately, my colleague Ahmad Brahmanta cannot join this event as moderator because he is currently positive COVID-19. So hopefully he can get well soon. And I hope all of you in a healthy condition right now. Please keep safe during this pandemic period. Now I will start my presentation today with the title Novel 5G Workflow for fracture modeling and also well placement in geothermal field. So the main idea of this presentation actually is about a workflow that may be quite common in oil and gas. and we try to apply it for geothermal case with several approaches that are different from the usual process. By having this oil and gas technology to solve the geothermal challenge, I hope it will be relevant enough with the main theme as mentioned by Deva, which is about the energy collaboration and also energy transition. I'm sure that every company has certain strategy for this energy transition. And for Schlumberger itself, as we can see here in this picture, Schlumberger has oil and gas as core portfolio and also several new energy. But it also has this one, we call it digital, the technology that across all of these kinds of energies. This technology, hopefully it can make us possible to support and also develop technologies across these energies, not only in the oil and gas, but also for this new energy. But basically, by adopting this oil and gas technology to the low carbon until neutral carbon energy sectors, we can help to solve the specific challenge. And for the example, in this today presentation, I will focus on the geothermal because this is one of the example that are already be done, especially in Indonesia. And now I will start about the geothermal itself. Okay, maybe this slide will be very basic for everyone in a geothermal background, but I hope that it can give a good insight for everyone that not in a geothermal background. For the example, if we have the petroleum background. I will explain about the geothermal system and also the operation stages for this geothermal. Now I will start with the geothermal system. Basically, as a system, of course, they have components, and usually we have at least 4 components, 4 main components here, which is the heat source, and then impermeable rock, the reservoir, and also the manifestation. I always said that when we want to understand this geothermal system, we can make analogy with boiling water process. So you have the water inside kettle and then you boil it above the stove. So first, of course, we need the fire, this one as heat source. And in the geothermal here, we have a hot magma. And then second, of course, we have the kettle, the place itself. And in this case, we have this impermeable rock where the heat can transfer with conductive process from this heat source into the reservoir, which is the place of the water itself. When the heat here can be transferred with a convective process. And after our water that here came from this recharge area, basically this is natural water that came from the rain. For the example, it will go from this recharge area into the reservoir, and then after in the reservoir, it get the heat from the heat source, and then it finally will become hot and then boil. And after boiled, there are some steam, for the example, or some hot fluid that can come out into surface that we call it as a manifestation. So this is how the geothermal system works. So it's a little bit different from the geothermal from the petroleum system, let's say. And the other things that may be different from the geothermal, from the petroleum system, is about the cap rock itself. When we have the kettle, of course, we have these eyelets. We have something above these, the water, right? And so usually we have this impermeable cap rock. In oil and gas, usually we have something like a layer of shell that, of course, we need to have this layer of shell first to make our oil or gas can be trapped under it. But in geothermal here, this cap rock can be formed by the process of mineralization, secondary mineralization, based on the hot fluid that in the reservoir. So we have to make sure that our reservoir here is hot enough, so it will create something that we call as a clay cap here. Then this clay cap will be above our reservoir. And for the geothermal operator itself, usually they're looking for this. They have to make sure that they have this kind of a clay cap or the close of this reservoir, and then also they have to make sure that they have enough permeability to be drilled. Then after they drill this geothermal reservoir, they can get the hot fluid or hot steam to be extracted and then used to generate the electricity. So that's a short story about this geothermal system. When I said this geothermal system, actually there are several types of geothermal system. For the example, in Indonesia itself, our geothermal system mainly related with the volcanic. So maybe it's not really like in the cartoon that I show here, because this is the simple form. But in Indonesia geothermal system, usually we will have something like a young volcano and then the volcanic system. So most of rocks in geothermal system is massive volcanic rock, for example like lava or intrusive, or also the volcanic clastic. And that's maybe why in Indonesia especially, we don't have certain data like seismic data in oil and gas, because here we are not looking for the layering lithology in oil and gas, but we are mainly focusing on where is this clay cap, of reservoir. So usually for the geophysics method, they use another non-seismic method like magnetotelluric or also gravity. So that's a little different maybe about the geothermal and also oil and gas. Then now I will explain about the stages itself. The stages for the geothermal operator. Sorry. Okay, so the stages here, of course, it started with the reconnaissance or exploration. In this stage, we don't have any well yet. So most of data that we have is data from surface, for the example, from the image Landsat or LiDAR, or let's say the geological surface mapping. And of course, from the measurement of a geophysics method. And after we certain about that location and we're sure that there is some potential with that location, we can go to the next step, which is in pre-feasibility step. In this step, we can choose where we will drill the first well. And during this process, usually we will create something that called conceptual model, something like this, like the geothermal system that we have. This conceptual model is like the image about how is our reservoir. But this image of the subsurface is only constructed based on the surface data and also the geophysics data. So there is no well data enough. But at least from that reference, we can start to look for where is the most potential target to be drilled, at least to confirm is it correct or not for our conceptual model. So that's why after we go to the pre-feasibility, we have our first well, and then we will go to the next stage, which is the feasibility. Basically, now we already have the first well that already drilled. So it means that we have more data that also can be used to update our conceptual model. So hopefully our reservoir here, our conceptual model will be more accurate. So that's why after we got that enough data, we can continue. Is it to make some analysis? Is it feasible or not to operate in this field? Let's say if this is feasible, then we can start to drill more well in the development drilling. And the process also continue like that. We have more data from drilling, and then we got more information. We got update from our conceptual model. So based on that information, we will have enough information to finally we can design how will be the power plant, what type of power plant that will be need, and how big the resource in our reservoir. So that's why we can also start the design and also construct that power plant. And after everything ready, finally we can start the operation and also generate the electricity from this geothermal field. Before I go to the detailed workflow, I will explain about the challenge for each state for this geothermal operation. So of course, in every state, they have their own risk. And usually the highest risk, of course, in the exploration stage, because in these states, we don't have a lot of data. So it's still high uncertainty, especially in the subsurface uncertainty. But it will go down, the risk will be go down when we have more data, absolutely after we in the operation, so our risk can be reduced. And the challenge here that I will show you is mainly about the common challenge about in every stage that we have. Let's start with the exploration stage. So the challenge on the problem that usually come up during this stage is about how we can integrate the very scattered and also dissimilar data to characterize a risk at the early stage. As I mentioned before, in this stage, we have very limited data because we're working with several multidiscipline. Let's say usually we call it 3G, the geology team, and then we have the geochemistry data, and also of course the geophysics data. How we integrate all of them, and then because usually when we're working with a different multidiscipline, there is something that different, so we have to integrate all of them until we get one final conceptual model that I mentioned before. So how we integrate all of them is something that some challenge if we're talking about the data itself. Then to the pre-feasibility stage, the challenge of course is how we can get a good location or a good target of the well for this our geothermal system. Especially here, we write without surface manifestation. So if you remember in the previous geothermal system, usually we will have the geothermal manifestation in the surface. For the example, like hot spring or fumarole. Let's say if we have that kind of manifestation, we can sure that okay, we have a geothermal system under this field. But how if we don't have that kind of manifestation? Maybe I can call some field for the example. Yeah, in Indonesia, we have something like that. We call it like hidden geothermal. It will be very difficult, especially if we don't have that kind of clue and we have to decide where we have to drill our geothermal well. And then with the data that we already acquired, how we can use all of that available data with more accurately, especially to estimate resource potential. Because in the feasibility analysis, we have to make sure that our field is economic in the economic value. It has good value, so we can explore more for our field. And then, of course, the other challenge is to identify another process maybe or another area near our field that should be done another measurement. For the example, after we have certain area and then we want to develop that area, maybe for the example, we can put a more empty measurement or gravity measurement. Where should I put this measurement? This is one. This is also the challenge after we have enough data. And for this challenge actually is we'll be back again with our conceptual model. So based on this initial conceptual model is like the reference, or it's like the theoretical that will be used to guide us how will be the next data that will be needed, or what kind of data that will be needed in the next step. So that's the challenge in the pre-feasibility. Now, when in the feasibility, you remember right now, we have the well data already, but when we have the well data, usually there is a big difference, let's say, with the predicted and also the actual resource. Of course, because we predicted it just based on the surface data, But now we have the subsurface data from the well bore. So there is something that difference, I say our interpretation maybe based on the data of our wells. If it has a good match, that's good. But not. But if we don't have a good match between this well data and also our initial conceptual model, it means that we have to update it again. So that will be another process that we need to be done. And the other things is with underline here is about fractures. Fractures is usually key to the production because usually in geothermal field, we need these fractures as the permeability resource. But usually these fractures is purely understood. So it's very difficult to identify where is the good permeability area. And also about the temperature spot to drive well targeting decision. So if I can say the three main parameters that very important when we're looking for a good reservoir in geothermal. First, it needs to have a good permeability, high temperature, and also neutral fluid. But at least here, the one that usually poorly understood is the permeability itself. Usually for the neutral fluid, we need data from our geochemistry and also the data from the sampling. But for the permeability and temperature, we can get the data from the well. But for the permeability, this is one kind of parameter that usually difficult to be understood or to be defined. And then the other challenge is how we rank the possible development scenario based on the dynamic simulation. Because after we have this updated conceptual model, the subsurface team usually will provide it to the reservoir team to create the dynamic simulation just to make sure that everything already in control or already in control. So we can choose how is the best development scenario for this field. So this is also how to make a good decision based on what that we already have, the data that we already have. But after we finally choose the scenario to develop this, and then we decide, okay, we will drill how many wells and the others. Finally, we are in the development stage. And in this stage, of course, we will have problem like how we drill. We can drill with budget, but within budget, so less budget, but hopefully with minimum failures. So it is also something that very difficult, of course, because we hope that we will we need less money, but we need also have a good result with minimum failure. So of course, this is some of the challenge. And then also this is some problem that usually happens in the wells that drill in geothermal. Let's say that the wells that after it is being drilled and it proven that this well is sub-commercial or maybe not commercial, so it will need more stimulation technique or maybe more process, so it can be more commercial. Maybe we need additional process and of course additional budget. And then there is limited understanding and predictability of reservoir behavior. This is about the forecasting, about how will be the process of in geothermal field in our field. This is can we make it can we maintain the production, and also how we tackle or we will solve the issue when, let's say, our production being decreased or something like that. So that's also, of course, the problem in the development stage. But between this challenge, the one that I will focus is the one in underline with a bold font, which is about the fractures. The fractures as the key point to identify the permeability. And this is one of the parameters that we use as a subject to create the process that we call as the new workflow, the 5G workflow. Actually, there are some people that ask me about 5G, what is 5G, why 5G? So 5G is actually 3G, the geology, geophysics, and also geochemistry. But also in this process, we have additional geomechanic and also geostatistic. So the starting point for this solution about this fracture, we basically try to use our experience or our technology that developed by Schlumberger for natural fracture reservoir in oil and gas business, especially for the carbonate lithology. And then we try to adapt it to geothermal through collaboration with a key operator in Indonesia. So the process itself, it starts with the analysis and also integration of the data, of course, that obtained from the well, and then also it needs insight that obtained from multiple sources. I can call it like the theoretical concept and the conceptual model that I said. It's also a good input that will be used during this process. So not only the well data itself, but we also need the conceptual, the theoretical or the background about the field itself. After that, we try to generate fracture models, the fracture itself, for each of the fracture drivers, because we will need something that we call it as fracture drivers. I will explain it more later. And then we'll combine them, and then to finally we can generate these 3D fracture permeability models. And after that, we can extract the permeability value based on that fractures, and then we can decide where is a sweet spot area. So when I say 5G, actually you can say that we have a lot of combination of multidiscipline expert here. We have several experts that working in this workflow. So it's not only like one single approach, but we have several approaches that we use during this workflow. So this is our model will be, our result will be about the modeling natural fracture distribution in the subsurface. Basically, when we said modeling, the challenge is about how we can populate an interpreted and also modeled structure, and then associated it the reservoir interval with fracture distribution that are below the resolution of geophysical survey. Let's say in oil and gas, we have seismic as the geophysical survey, but not in geothermal. So that's why we need another approach. So the distribution itself, of course, will be calibrated again with the fracture input data from well data, let's say from image log, and then core, temperature for the sample, and another mechanical properties. And also this the distribution here will be modeled by considering relevant drivers to populate the model. I will explain about several drivers, but back again, in every field, it will be different. So there is field that maybe just need two kind of drivers, or maybe just need one kind of driver. So it is back again to what kind of field that we have here. But we have to say that maybe this model fracture distribution and orientation are unlikely to match exactly with the fracture distribution in the subsurface. But at least our goal here is that the average property, the average permeability that we will obtain from this process can be provided to the process of history maps for the example, and it can have the simulation process, the dynamic modeling. So it can help to identify the potential of a sweet spot. The process itself, I will explain in this four main subject. First is about the data, what kind of data that we will need. And then about the workflow itself, maybe a little technical, but hopefully it's not really detailed. And here we also try to use a geostatistic that I've mentioned before. The objective is we can minimize time spent on the repeated tasks. So we use something like a workflow. So we don't have to doing the same process. We just have to put the input, and then the machine will create the result based on the process that we already set. And then after that, I will explain about the outcome itself, about how we will use the result of our process of this the fracture model. Now I will start with the data. Basically for the data here, we have the data from wells here, In this case, we have the boreholes image data. From the borehole image, usually we have the rock texture, and then fracture type, and then fracture orientation, and also fracture aperture if we have the resistivity log, for the example. So this kind of information can be provided by our borehole image borehole geologist team usually. So actually, for Schlumberger itself, this wellbore approach was developed by our data service team several years ago and has been used for multiple geothermal operators in Indonesia. And then we also sometimes can have more logs. For the example, if we have a sonic or acoustic log, it can help to analyze where fracture that actually open or close. Is it really contribute the production or not? So we can have a more accurate model because we can only model the fracture that really contribute to our permeability in our field. And of course, we will have the production data for the example like the spinner, and also for the example like the total loss circulation location, and where is the feed zone, and also the wellbore pressure and also temperature, at least to give us some insight. So that's about the data that usually we use. Basically, what that we have here, the main data is like the main input that we need. So this is the data that we will use to propagate the model of fracture that, let's say, it's just the model, but the real fracture is actually there based on the data of the wells. If you see from this picture, the fracture well data, when we put it inside a petrel, we will have something like a plan or this ellipsoid shape. This is the shape of the fracture itself with a certain orientation of a dip and also deep angle. This is basically will be in certain wells if we have that kind of data in our wells. And then after we have this, we can also analyze, like for the example, the fracture set orientation for not only single well, but also let's say for all of the field. And not only this kind of this input data, but we also need the interpretation and model of structure. So this structural model usually generated based on the lithology boundary. So we'll need the lithology boundary that has been interpreted, let's say, from the core or from the well. And then we also have the fault data or fault plan. So just like in the oil and gas process in petrol, yeah, we have the well top, for the example, we generate the surface. But in this case, we don't have seismic interpretation, but at least we have this kind of surface based on the well data that we have. And also we need the faults data, and the faults itself is come from the interpretation from the LiDAR, let's say, and also from the geological modeling in the geological mapping in the surface, let's say, and also another geophysics process that's like gravity, for the example. But maybe it's not as clear as in the seismic, but at least we have this kind of fault. And then after we have this fault and also on this boundary of lithology, we will make this model of structure that will be placed where we can propagate our fracture data. In here, in the right, we have the micro earthquake, for example, MEQ. This MEQ is actually one of the geophysics process, but this is actually in the optional. We can use any other data that related maybe with the permeability. If we show that it will be related, that we can use it. For the example, this micro earthquake, when we have this micro earthquake event, we have this small dot here. It means that there is some micro seismic event there. There is some like fracture there, because when this fracture being cracked, there is some wave that can be acquired by the receiver, and it will generate this micro earthquake event. So the conclusion is when we have this event of micro earthquake, it means that there is a good permeability. Let's say the simple thing is like that. So it will give us a good insight about how we will generate the driver RB, how we will populate our fracture. So we will set for the example, for the area near a good event of micro earthquake, we will put high intensity of fracture over there. So that's just for the example about another input that we can use during the process. Basically, when we want to create this natural fracture prediction, the challenge is about the natural fracture itself, but where we can find this natural fracture. These natural fractures may act to recharge the reservoir from meteoric waters or as conduit for the production. And these natural fractures also can be localized along faults. So it can it's not spread anywhere, but sometimes it just localized in certain area, or maybe just along the margin of intrusion because of the thermal cooling, or more widely, it can also distribute along the bending or fault field stress because of the process of bending in the layers of our lithology. These unique fracture sets, I said fracture sets, because we will model it one by one. For the example, if we have a fracture that related with fault, we will model it itself. So we will call it a one fracture set. So we will have a lot of fracture sets here based on how many let's say driver that we think it really impact where is the fractures in our field. So after these fracture sets are modeled, it will be based on the associated drivers. It will create the distribute of the fracture for entire field, and that's how our big objective based on using this workflow. These fractures, the driver that I mentioned before, usually is result of various geological events. And the model here using drivers such as the distance to fault. So we're talking about all fractures that near the fault, the bending, and then fault that fault associated fracture on NFP, natural fracture prediction. So this is like the fracture based on the geomechanic of the fault, and also intrusion and also thermal cooling based on the intrusion body. Actually, a key component of our solution is to use these fracture drivers to tackle the problem of capturing fracture trends in area without well, right? But here we set innovation for intrusion because maybe for distance to fault or maybe in NFP is something that usually used in oil and gas before. But for the application into geothermal, we try to require more development new driver, in this case intrusion and thermal cooling, to capture the fracture that develop as a result of intrusion and also thermal cooling effect of this intrusion. So that's why we call it as innovation. In the next slide, I will present one by one about this driver with more detail. I will start with the distance to fault. Distance to fault, or I will call it damage zones, when basically the fractures that related to fault zones. And this fractures intensity usually will decrease away from the principal fault zone. So if you see in the left picture here, there is a Decalo curve. So when we have a small distance from fault, it means that this zero, it means in the fault zone itself. And then distance to fault, it means that if we have far from fault, the intensity of our fracture will be less. And we can put the value here, the intensity based on this distance to fault. Usually when we try to choose how will be the decalo, how will be the curve, we can use the data that we have in our field. Let's say in certain fault, because we already have the model fault, we will extract the fracture near that fault, and then we will see how is the trend between the how many fault and how many fracture, let's say, when we have near the fault, and also how will be in the decay, the decrease of fracture intensity when we are far from this fault. So that's the principle about these fault zones. Basically for this how far, if we call it how far, the width of the zone is usually extend around 20 until 100 meters away from the central fault core. So the number of fractures, let's say P10, will decrease away from this fault core with the usually exponential, or maybe I call it the decay law, the logarithmic law. This is based on several studies, but back again, I said we can also use our data, our data in that field as reference. About the orientation of fracture itself, so we already know how will be the intensity near that fault, the intensity of fracture. But about the orientation of fracture itself, usually will be based on the orientation of fault. So the deep angle and also the deep azimuth of that fractures near the fault will be more or less impacted by the deep angle and deep azimuth of that fault. Usually, that's how we consider the orientation of the fracture. The second driver is the bending or geomechanical driver. Basically, the fracture related to bending approach can also be used as driver for fracture modeling. This is using geomechanical based restoration tool. We call it the software called Dynal 3D. So the computed stress are also constrained from the restoration analysis that then it will be compared with the observed natural fracture from our well data in order to evaluate which part of our fracture that actually associate with the bending itself. So on the fracture characterize itself, like for the type, deep angle, and deep azimuth, is based on the compute of stress or strain based on the process of restoration that we done for our for this kind of layers of lithology. So the idea is when we have the bending, we can make the restoration and make it back again into flat, because of course all of the lithology basically mainly come from the flat. And when we make it flat or in the restoration process, of course there will be the stress that can be calculated. And this stress is one of the basic about how we let's say predict how should be the fracture, how is the deep angle and the deep azimuth of fractures that near that kind of bending. After we have that kind of predicted fracture based on our restoration, we can compare it with the initial data, and then we can choose which data that actually associate with that bending. So that's the idea of this driver. That's about the bending. Now is about the natural fracture prediction. This is actually also based on the fault, but the concept is relatively similar with the bending. But here the reference is the process is not the restoration, but the process is about when the fault is formed or happen. So when we have this kind of fault, the process usually will also generate the fractures on the joints. And we have this kind of theory about how will be the deep or the deep angle and so the deep azimuth of the fractures based on the fault itself. So the theory is the same. So we try to have the geomechanical based solution to constrain this DFN, and the tools also same with based on the IBM 3D. Basically, it will compute maps of a natural fracture orientation and density trends from observed major faults. So that's why we need the fault as the reference, and then we will need the observed fracture data along wells as the real data where we can compare it. The far field stress itself is calculated using stress inversion technology based on the fault framework, the fault model that we have, and also on the fracture data. I will show, this is some of the picture for the example. So when the discontinuity flip to create this fault, usually there is a stress that perturb showing tensile area in the red and also the compressive area in blue. You can see in the picture in the left. And the orientation of S1, which is this sigma big H, the most comprehensive principal stress here, is reoriented close to the fault usually. So this stress pattern can be compared to outcrop from the example in the right. We have reactivated pre-existing fracture showing that there is a branch crack in tensile areas and also styloid in compressive area. And both of them, the orientation is following the orientation of sigma big H and also sigma little h respectively, so S1 and S2. So that's why basically the theory is about when we have the direction of S1, S2, and S3, where we can find the fault, where we can find the fracture, where we can find the styloid, and also how will be the orientation. That's the theory. And then we will combine it with our real data to make sure and then to check which fracture data, which our fracture data that actually related with the process of generating this fault. So that's about this natural fracture prediction. The process itself is like this. So the main input is the main faults, the gray plane, if you see the faults. And then we have these observed fractures, and also usually the rock properties is the optional, but it's good if you have. So first we need to have this fault model and also fracture data. And then we can use the Petrel to compute the perturbed stress around the faults. This is in the right, you see the orientation of the stress itself, so S1, S2, and S3. And in the under it, there will be a joint, or I say the fracture. This is a theoretical fracture. Also our fracture itself, how will be the orientation, the deep angle and also deep azimuth. So first we run one simulation. For one simulation, let's say we have this sigma 3, and then let's say if we have this kind of sigma 3 and we have this join our fracture data, where is the regime itself? So we have the orientation and also stress ratio. Let's say based on the first simulation, based on the calculation formula that we have this strike slip. And then after we run the second simulation, let's say we have the reverse. So we run this kind of calculation until 25,000 simulation, until finally we will have this map, this tectonic map. This tectonic map is basically consists of stress ratio in the x-axis and also the orientation of the sigma big H. So from here, after we doing that kind of simulation based on the fault model and also based on our fracture data, we can see how is the regime, the tectonic regime in our field. And here you can see that most of our fracture, let's say, it has a good fit. It means that based on theoretical and based on our data, most of our fracture data is a good match when we think that in our field is in normal regime, something like that. So we can say that this is the best fit is in normal regime. This is the auto-calculate or inversion process. So if you don't have any clue about how is your tectonic regime, you can use this process and then you can see how will be how is the tectonic regime based on this simulation. But once again, this will be based on the fracture model that you have. But in case you have the theoretical or conceptual theory about how is your tectonic regime, actually you already have the value of stress ratio, for example, and also the stress orientation. There is also option where you can put that value, so you can also generate this natural fracture prediction, but based on the theory that you already have or you already analyzed. Then we go to the intrusion driver. There is two. First is the geomechanical and the second is the thermal pooling. The geomechanical here is the same concept with the NFP because actually it uses the same technology. So basically fractures are populated in the heterogeneous stress field created by the intrusion. So the fractures are modeled only in the section beyond the intrusion. So once again, this process will only generate the fracture that in the hosting rock, but not inside the body of intrusion itself. then the intrusion is simply an applied pressure mimicking the step of the intrusion. So the pressure will be like the picture in the right, it will be pressure like the intrusion. In addition to the pressure of intrusion, then there will be a far field stress that determined from this inversion is that applied in the model, and then just like in the NFV, we combine it with our vector data to see which vector data that explained with this geomechanical intrusion driver. The last driver is the thermal cooling. From this thermal cooling is similar to distance to fault. Yeah, basically when we have this intrusion, and theoretically there will be fractures that are created within a zone around the margin of intrusion itself, and there will be a decay-low curve, like just like the distance to fault. So when we have near this margin of intrusion, we will have a high intensity. But if if it is far from the margin of intrusion, the intensity will be less. So that's about the thermal cooling. In here, usually there is some theoretical and also can also back again to our data, but usually we can use the margin like around 1,000 meter or 1 kilometer, or also we can assume offset the intrusion from the orientation itself, the vector are parallel to the margin, and in this kind of driver, the constant vector density also usually also applied. So for the intensity in the area of hosting rock, we can use this decay-low intensity, but inside the intrusion body, we can use a constant intensity, because let's say that inside the intrusion, we will have the fractures, but it will be spread anywhere inside this intrusion body. So that's all about the fractures. Basically, we already have the data and all of the drivers as guidance. We integrate all of them, and then we generate the fracture model, not only in well data, not only in well location, but in entire field. So this is the result. It will be the full field DFN. After we have that DFN, this is I want to show you some technical detail, but maybe slightly, not really detail. Actually, for each driver, we have to following this step, but I will use NFP for the example here. So after we have the information of deep angle and also deep azimuth, also intensity, we will use that information to generate this vector driver. From the NFP, if you remember, this kind of orientation and also intensity is come from the fault, from the process, the inversion process. So we will use that kind of parameter to be used in the process that we call as generate use vector driver to generate a discrete vector network. In here, the input that needed is of course first the intensity, the vector intensity that we know. For the natural vector prediction is come from the inversion process. And then if you see in the geometry, we can put the value over the example like the aperture and also vector length. And then in the orientation, we put the deep angle, deep azimuth, and also the concentration. I will explain it later. And also in the aperture, we can, if you have the information about the aperture value, you can also put about the information of the aperture value in this process. And then finally, we can run it to get the vector model. About the concentration itself, maybe basically this is like the value of the parameter. Usually the value is between 5 to 100. With high value, it means that the vector network will exactly follows the strike vector of our compute fractures. So if we have the deep angle and deep azimuth from our NFP, and then if we have a high concentration, it means that the vector model that generated will be really following the orientation of a vector from NFP. So that's the concept of the concentration. So in case you have a uncertainty with your driver, for the example, you can maybe have maybe lower concentration for the example, but of course you have to check again with your vector data from the well. And after you run it for the example, let's say we have this NFP that come from the two vector types and also one tectonic model, but 2 tectonic events. Finally, we will have 3 fracture sets just based on the one driver. So fracture set 1, for the example, is the fracture set of joint that related with NFP. Fracture set 2 is fracture joint is the faults and that related with the NFP but tectonic 1. And from the tectonic 2, we also still have faults. So we will have 3 fracture sets. This is just one driver. So if you remember, if we have, like, say, 4 drivers, we will have a lot of fracture sets, and all of them will be combined together to explain to have the fracture model in our field. And here is the final result. The final result after we run the process that I've shown before is this DFN model. So DFN model is the physical fracture representation. So the shape will be like plan, a very small plan that represent our fracture model. When we generate it, it can be millions of fracture model that will be generated. And also there will be an implicit fracture model. This is for the fracture that for the length is maybe short. We can put it in implicit, so that the result will be not in plan, but already in the properties or the value for the itself. After we have this kind of DFN, then we use the process that called as upscale model. Basically, in this upscale model is we want to generate the permeability. We want to extract the fracture permeability, the fracture porosity, and also the sigma factor based on the DFN that we have. So with this kind of properties, then we can use it later for the example for the simulation. But the one thing that I want to mention here, in this process, we also mentioned that we use geostatistics. Okay, so the process not only stop with that process until we have the one fracture permeability, let's say one fracture permeability model, but we run it for several multi-realization with variables from, let's say, aperture, also from the fracture length, and also different parameter or different value of the drivers. So finally, we will have several results of the fracture permeability model. Here, maybe a little bit different with the oil and gas, because in oil and gas, maybe we're talking about the volume calculation, like how will be the difference of P10, P50, or P90 of the volume calculation. But the process that we saw here is stop until the permeability model, because we only focus on the permeability of the fracture itself. So we generate several realization and then see which realization that may actually match with our data, for example, our production data. This is also some example of the study that we are already done. For the example, how we capture the uncertainty with multiple fracture model realization, but this is maybe not in the petroleum, but not in the geothermal, but in petroleum with the carbonate reservoir. Now, for the final part is the outcome. So after we generate the sweet spot for the multiple realization, hopefully it can be used to drive operational excellent sweet spot mapping and also drill plan. And this sweet spot can be used as reference as drill plan trajectory planning, and as you can see in the right picture. So we use this kind of information to decide and design how will be the trajectory planning of our well will be to get a good production, for the example, for our wells, and based on this sweet spot map or sweet spot model. And for the parameter itself, of course, we can use it for the Petrel RE, for the example, or for the dynamic model creation, because usually they will need the information about the fractures permeability and also fracture porosity and also the sigma factor especially. So here we are focused on the fractures, but not for the matrix, because usually for the matrix itself, we in geothermal and they don't use a lot of process to get it. Or for the example, they can use the constant value. So here what that we can provide is more information about the fractures parameters. Basically, this is to close the my presentation. Further process or further vision that we want to obtain is we want to deliver value across the geothermal asset life cycle by reducing uncertainty and also increasing operational efficiencies or reducing the cost. And the one that I presented is about how we reduce the uncertainty about by having well placement optimization based on the sweet spot mapping. So this is, as you can see in the left, as I mentioned before, about the stages of geothermal, if you remember in the initial of presentation. So by having this less uncertainty, especially for this the workflow itself in the development or also in the feasibility study, hopefully it can reduce the uncertainty and also can help to reduce the risk during that stage. This is some key takeaways, hopefully, that we can get from my presentation. First, that geothermal is one of new energy that offers a key component in the Schlumberger's new energy strategy. Yeah? And then we try to use and also develop close technology or workflow, for the example, between geothermal and oil and gas, to hopefully it can dramatically reduce the time to deployment of new solution, for the example, for geothermal. And in this workflow, the innovative fracturing modeling workflow for well placement, hopefully it could be an option to reduce reservoir uncertainty and also increasing operational efficiency. And in the conclusion, of course, in this case, combination of digital with a proper domain knowledge is something that very important. Not only in geothermal, I think that but for all the energy transition. That's all from me. Thank you very much for your attention. I think that we can start for the question and answer session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mbak Sri, for the knowledge sharing on geothermal. It's quite new, especially for SPE, yeah, because normally we are dealing with petroleum system. But to collaborate and to achieve the net zero target of the government, now we're doing more and more collaboration with the new energy. One of it is geothermal. That's why we bring this topic into our technical discussion group. So before we do Q&A session, let's do a photo session first. Chelsea, please, I'll give it to you.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Dian, and thank you also, Mbak Sri, for the presentation. Before we proceed to the question and answer session, we will first have a photo session together. So I would like to invite all the participants to please turn on your camera so we can take a picture together. Okay, everyone, we will take a picture together with the committee and also with the speaker.
If you want to use the virtual background for participants, we already share it in the chat box.
Yes, okay. I will wait maybe for more people to turn on the camera. Okay. In the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, once again. In the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, smile. All right. Thank you, everyone. And now we will proceed to the question and answer session. I will hand it over to Mbak Dian.
Yeah, thank you, Chelsea. So again, thank you very much, Mbak Sri, for your explanation about geothermal system and the innovative workflow, 5G workflow that we developed in Schlumberger. Yeah. So we have several questions already from the participants. This is related to the geothermal introduction in the beginning regarding the stages in geothermal system. Yeah. So how many? This is from Muhammad Taufik. let me read it for you. Otherwise, do you want to ask yourself, Muhammad Taufik? Ya, Pak Muhammad, silakan kalau mau, if you want to ask directly. Let me unmute you. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I just have a question regarding this exploration phase for the geothermal wells. Yeah, because I'm new here. Mostly my experience is in oil and gas. Yeah, for quite some time now. And this is new for me for geothermal. And also, we have a project here upcoming in East Java. Plan for exploration, but the issue we don't have any data or anything offset like offset well. So just like wildcat in oil and gas. Normally, how many exploration well that we need to we need to drill before we get into the feasibility study phase based on a statistic in Indonesia.
From the exploration well, if I'm not mistaken, maybe around 3. At least first maybe 1, from the very beginning. But I think that it also will depend on the area itself. So I think that this exploration well, at least it can cover not only the heat source but also the boundary, for the example, so we can like delineate how large is our geothermal system or geothermal field. So we'll be back again to the field.
Okay, thank you. So it's about phase 3 wells. I mean.
Yeah, at least I think 3. At least, yeah.
So thank you, Pak Taufik. So according to Mbak Sri, it's around 3 exploration wells, Mbak Sri, to be able to do some feasibility study. But not only the wells, but also to follow up on that, what are the minimum data acquisition that are required for, especially for the wildcat geothermal wells, what are the minimum data which is required for to conduct later on the feasibility stage?
Yeah, so I said this is minimum 3, but it can of course more if we, let's say in the 1 or 2 we don't have a good result, maybe we can drill more just to make sure is it really a good field or not. But when I say good or not, usually in geothermal is the parameter is the temperature of the fluid. This is one of the information data that we need, Mbak Dian. So first, we can confirm the temperature in the subsurface. That's the first parameter, of course, and also the pressure. So the pressure and also temperature, and of course, the most important thing is can we find this total circulation or the permeability? Because sometimes we have a good temperature, high temperature, but when we don't have a good permeability, of course, it means that we cannot extract anything. So at least we have this kind of the production data, like the spinner. Can we find this total circulation? And then of course the basic data like the lithology, for the example, from the cutting or maybe from the coring. That's also important, I think, for this wildcat of geothermal. And usually if we can get the fluid, if we have the total circulation, we get the fluid, we can also analyze the fluid itself, so we can check about the geochemistry component. Is it neutral or not neutral? But even if it is not neutral or acid, we can also use that data, because it means that maybe this is too close with the heat source, or maybe too far from the system. So it also can help to delineate how is the geothermal system in our field. So maybe that that is three or more data that at least we can get from the first well. Yeah.
So you mean that in the first wells, we don't really need to have this downhole logging data such as borehole images, sonic. Is that also some minimum data requirement in the exploration, or I mean you can acquire it later on once the exploration well is tested good? Something like that.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Vadian. It's very good question. From what that I usually know that it's not the minimum requirement, so we can acquire it later. Because let's see that this is very first well. At least we just want to make sure that we have the geothermal system first here. So we don't talk about the fracture modeling like that what I already presented here. So if you want to have it, that of course good, but I think that to have that kind of logs, because if we talking about like the borehole and this image log, it can also be used to identify the permeability, but very detailed, right? And in the very first, I think that at least when we have a good permeability, that will be good enough, or maybe that also sufficient enough, let's say, to create the conceptual model or also the dynamic model based on let's say the how big is the for example PI or productivity index, or also this kind of production parameter. So I think that we don't have to get the detailed information, in my opinion, until we let's say we already sure that okay, this field is really commercial, for the example. Then we want to study more, and then we can get more logs on that. But when you're not sure enough with your field, and then you already acquire a lot of data, the risk is very high. That's what I can say. So yeah, of course the data will be very useful, but I just want to say that only if you have really a good confidence, then maybe you can have that kind of data. Maybe that's what in a geothermal median. That's based on my opinion. But of course, if you want to have it in the very first, it's good because it's good have the data. But in my opinion, maybe it's not a minimum requirement.
Thank you very much for your answer. We also have a question from Mr. Adam Zeiza. Perhaps you want to ask directly to Mbak Sri. We will try to unmute you. Adam Zeiza.
Yeah, just a quick question regarding the DFN model. Because I've been working in oil and gas, I'm curious whether in geothermal you need to history match the model as well, like in the oil and gas, or not. That's basically it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the questions. Very good question, because maybe I'm not talk a lot about it. History match is something that very important, of course, because it's like how we validate our model, right? Because the one that we created here is still in the static model. The next step after we doing this DFN in geothermal, they also doing this kind of history match, and doing this history match, they one of the important parameter that I've mentioned is this fracture permeability, and also the sigma factor from the example. So yeah, they have their production data already. So it's like how we validate our static model based on the DFN that we have. So that's the answer. So they do the story matching and also creating the dynamic model.
Answer your question, Radha. Okay, so while we're waiting for the response from Adam, there is another question from Mbak Anissa Amalia. Maybe you can unmute yourself and ask directly to Mbak Sri. Anissa Amalia. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for the
Yes.
opportunity. So I think I have typed my question in the chat box, but to confirm, maybe if it's not really understood. So I'm just curious with the context of sweet spot that delivered in your slide, because I think because I'm working currently in the geothermal industry, the definition of sweet spot is rare to be talked much in my context. So I'm just curious, how is the definition of the sweet spot according to your last project or your current research on, and what type of problems, or basically what types of problems that try to be solved by the that kind of analysis. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, so the sweet spot here is like the detail area of interest, if I can say, for the definition. Yeah, the sweet spot that we're talking here in this project is actually the area with a very good permeability. Let's say the highest temperature, highest permeability area. So that will be the sweet spot. But during this project itself, the process is like this. So we have the fracture model from the process that we already done, and then we generate multiple realization with the results for each of case is the permeability model. So once again, I said here, we only talking about one parameter here, which is the permeability. So after we have several options of permeability model, we try to get the best area, and here we can use the workflow, of course, to create in the project we call it the probability map. So the probability map is basically we try to get a good probability, which means that when we drill that area, it means that that area will, let's say, more than 80% will give you high permeability. Let's say the high permeability here from the example, from the value is more than 30 millidarcy from the example. So when we have a good probability, it means that there is a good chance or a good percentage of the probability that we will get a good permeability in that location. And that's how we generate this sweet spot. So sweet spot means that actually this color is the probability color, yeah. So let's say red is low probability or 0, and then green, let's say, is a high probability or 1. Probability of what? This is probability of getting a good permeability permeability reservoir. So that's about the sweet spot. What that I want to add is actually to have a good reservoir, permeability is just one of the parameter that important. Yeah, of course we need the temperature and also the neutral fluid. But in this project, especially, we are focusing on this permeability parameter. So this sweet spot is related with the permeability. That's what I can answer, Anissa.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sri, for the explanation.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. So for other participants who has any questions to Mbak Sri, please raise your hand and we will unmute you, or you can type your question in the chat box. So while we are waiting, I have a few questions. maybe very basic, but this is geothermal. So, so based on your experience, yeah, does the geothermal system in Indonesia always have all the 5 drivers, or it's more a combination of 1 and 2, you know, or either one, yeah? So, and which driver has the dominant effect on the production? Thank you.
Mbak Dian. Okay, Mbak Dian. Yeah, so between those drivers in Indonesia, as I mentioned before, in Indonesia, the geothermal system is related with volcanic. So we're talking about the volcanic activity, and this is about this intrusion, right? And also in Indonesia, because it is in active tectonic area, we have a lot of faults. It's good. So between those drivers, at least we have 4 usually. The drivers that related with intrusion of magma here, and also of course drivers about the fault. The other driver, which is the bending, is not really common and maybe just a special field, but I'm not sure, maybe more than yeah, maybe a lot, but maybe I don't have a lot of experience with this bending driver, because basically in this bending, it means that the fracture is come from the compression process. So it means that we should have the compression regime in that geothermal field. So maybe the possibility, for the example, this driver can happens when the old lithology, for the example, is have this kind of tectonic process. So they have the bending the layers and they have the crack, and then after that there is this geothermal system, and this crack provide the fracture on them. So that's happened in Indonesia. I think most of them should have this intrusion and also faults. Yeah. And for the second question is which driver that really will have a big impact. Based on the project or based on the experience that I have here, here is the intrusion itself. But yeah, I cannot say the intrusion, but because when we're talking with about the project, it means that there are some parameters that we have to also thinking. Like for the example, in certain project, we will have this thermal effect will provide a very good impact. When we said that this intrusion, we're talking about a very big intrusion body. It means that most of our geothermal field will be covered by this intrusion. And when we're talking about the driver, it means that it will give a lot of impact to the fractures. We can say that maybe most of fractures in our field related with this intrusion. So that's one case. But in certain case also, when we have like a small intrusion rather than the fault, for the example, the fault is quite a lot, maybe the impact will come from the faults. But yeah, this is just based on experience. Yeah, so usually intrusion give more impact here, because we're just talking about the geometry, and in this case, in my case here, the intrusion is quite large intrusion, for the example. So in my particular case, this intrusion give most impact on the fracture. So that's my my answer, Mbak Dian.
Thank you very much, so basically it's a combination really. So you need the magma intrusion to be present, and also the fractures, the faulting system, right, to be present as well, in order to have a conduit for the either the meteoric water or the geothermal steam. And then also the reservoir, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, so basically a combination of few of those factors.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's any question from the participant, please go ahead. You can raise your hand directly. We have a question from Gabriela Jasmine. Please unmute yourself. Yeah,
Okay,
please
so
go ahead.
I'm Gabrielle Jasmine, an undergraduate student, and I'm actually curious. My first question is, it is known from the presentation that one of the challenges in pre-feasibility is how we use all the available data to more accurately estimate the resource potential. And hereby, petrol is used for reservoir simulation, and can it also be used as one of the ways to accurately estimate the potential? And if so, is it used alone, or are there any software used? And second question, maybe in the next 20 or 30 years, with such rapid development in geothermal, can it replace oil and gas as the main energy? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Gabriel, for the question. I will try to answer. The first question is about the estimate of a resource, and you're asking, can petrol estimate the resource in a geothermal, and can petrol work by itself? The answer is no. So when we're talking about the potential resource in geothermal, I can say it's a little bit different from oil and gas. Yeah, in oil and gas, we're talking about the volume calculation, about how many barrel of oil or gas that we can produce, for the example. Yeah. But the resource that we're talking in geothermal is not only about the volume itself. The volume is of course important. The volume will be between the clay cap that I mentioned before until the base of reservoir, usually where we cannot find another permeability. Yeah. But when we said that this is a good geothermal, usually we're not talking about the volume but the power. So how many watt or how many joule of steam that can be produced, that can how many watt of electricity that can be generated. And when we're talking about this power, we're not only talking about the geometry, not only talking about the geometry, but we're also talking about the heat, about the temperature. Okay, so and in this case, maybe of course petrol cannot work it by itself, because when we're talking about the heat, it means that we have to make sure that the temperature is good enough, not only the permeability, the one that I already mentioned before. And in this case, we need another software maybe, or another approach, maybe not only from the geology, but also from the geochemist, but also from the well testing and the others. So yeah, there is a lot of multidiscipline that needs to be combined together to get this kind of resource. So I can say that even for petrol itself, after we have this kind of model of fracture, we of course need the simulator, right? It can be Eclipse or anything else that can generate the dynamic model, and that dynamic model also will be one of the basic to decide the resource it be. So that's my answer will be about the estimate the resource in geothermal. Is it answer your question, Gabriel?
Yes, it answers.
Okay, then the second question is about can the geothermal energy change or replace the oil, or let's say non-carbon energy? This is actually something that maybe not, I cannot really answer it. So this is just based on my opinion. Yeah. In my opinion, this is like when we're talking about the energy, a good country, in my opinion, this is barely my opinion, so to have at least more than one energy, so we're not only depend on one single energy. During that kind of time, yeah, in my opinion, the best option is we we can have like the combination here. So not only the geothermal, but also the other new energy. But of course, in my opinion, once again, when we can develop all of the new energy, I think that the demand of this energy is quite big, not only in Indonesia, but also in the world, right? And in that time, I'm not sure if our new energy also can fulfill all of the demand. So maybe, in my opinion, if that will be based on my estimation and based on my prediction, it will be difficult for one single energy to fulfill all of the energy demand for one country. In this case, I think that we need a combination and work together for all of kind of energy. To, of course, we doing our best. For the example, the geothermal operators, of course, want to generate more electricity. For the example, yeah, I think that everyone should generate energy as the best as they can from their energy for the example this geothermal, and then we can see later how we combine it. We combine it together, but in my opinion, we should work together to get a good energy combination to fulfill the energy demands, not only for the Indonesia, but also for the world. So, and that's only my opinion, so it can be different, or maybe there's another study about it, but that's just based on my opinion. Hope it can answer you, Gabriel.
Yes, it answers clearly. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you for your question, Gabriel, and thank you for the answer, Mbak Sri. Is there any other question from participants? We still have a few more minutes before we close this session. Please go ahead. If there's any question, you can raise your hand to ask directly or fill in or type in the chat box.
Or if you have any feedback or comment, or I make some mistake, you can also correct me if I'm wrong. For the audience.
Oh,
Just
there is one more question from Henry Sihombing. Maybe you want to ask directly, or do you want me to read it?
Henry.
I think I can say it directly. Hi Sri, great presentation. I just want to ask, how do you include matrix permeability, but also with fracture permeability? Because some of the volcanoclastic doesn't have any facies orientation, I guess. So how do you combine them both and perhaps calculate the both of them as a, you know, what you call as a sweet spot? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Henry. So yeah, so actually, from this study itself, we only working for the fracture. So I'm not touching these matrix parameters, the permeability, porosity, and also the parameters of the matrix. Okay, but usually in the geothermal operator, how they can get the parameter from the matrix? If I'm not mistaken, usually they have the value. So it's like the average value. So the value is like not as detailed as the porosity or permeability in oil and gas. So the value from the matrix is usually it can be a constant value. And this value come from the study. For the example, maybe based on the rock sample or based on the geological study. And then they decide how big is the porosity or the permeability. Because as you mentioned, Henry, the porosity or permeability that come from the lithology is very small in the usual geothermal field. So that's why they don't give a lot of concern with the matrix. I can say. So even in Petrel, we have like facies modeling, or to model the facies, to model the lithology itself. It cannot be done in geothermal, not only because they don't have like the layering, but also it's very difficult to make the like the local lithology, for the example. So usually, based on my experience, for the lithology, we make it as simple, the simple one. So like the lithology unit, so like already in the lithology unit, not as detailed as maybe just one single rock, like sand or cell, or fine sand and the other. So we make it like a facies A already, facies B, but it's very not detailed, so just like a very big zone of that. The other thing is because this lithology is usually not really correct associated with the permeability. Because usually in this permeability, because mostly come from the secondary permeability from the fractures, it can spread anywhere, not on the single lithology. Even maybe, and there is some theory or study, of course, when we have like a more rigid lithology, it should generate more fractures. That also can be related, but based on the experience, based on the project, here we're just focusing on the fracture itself. And in this case, we don't give concern on honoring the lithology distribution. And so I can say that for the lithology distribution itself, of course, it can be generated to create this lithological model. But once again, if we're talking about the impact, maybe it's not really significant. So that's why for the lithology model here, we make it not as detailed as in the oil and gas. And for the value itself, for the reservoir simulation, they use like the average value or the single value from the information, maybe from the geological team. So maybe that's from what my understanding in the.
Okay, thank you very much. So the time is nearing to the end. As a moderator, I have the right to ask the last question, because there's no more question from the participants. So I'll ask the last question, and then this will conclude our Q&A session. So my last question is, based on your experience identifying the sweet spots, what is the best type of trajectory to target those sweet spots? Is it vertical well, normally in geothermal, vertical or horizontal or high angle wells, to produce the best steam or production in the geothermal system? Thank you, and that's my last question.
Okay, Mbak Dian, thank you for the question. And actually, that's like the next question, because after we did this project until we got the sweet spot, we plan to make another analysis about to decide the well placement until the well design. What that I can say, maybe I cannot say that this is like the final answer, because it's not done yet on the study. But usually from the well trajectory in geothermal, for the case in my project, they already have a lot of well pad, so it will be like not commercial enough to drill another new well with the vertical. So usually we can use the existing wells that already there, and then we can make another pad with the current let's say well pad, and then we make another trajectory based on that location. So usually it's not really horizontal, so I can say maybe like usually they have the deviated wells, so not really vertical or horizontal. So maybe that's from my experience and from my understanding. But yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Mbak Sri. So this concludes our session. Thank you very much for your knowledge sharing and discussion. Thank you for the participants for all the questions, and participate on the discussion. So this concludes our Q&A session, and I'll hand over to Chelsea back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Dian, for leading the question and answer session. And now we will proceed to the next session, which is the memento giving session. And the memento will be given to the speaker by the project manager of SP Java AES 2022, Mbak Deva Ulita.
Thank you, Chelsea. So, Kasri, thank you so much for accepting our invitation for the very fruitful and interesting presentation. But don't worry, only virtual one, but we will send you the real one soon. Okay, so
You can keep it for
hopefully
me,
you
Deva.
will want to collaborate with us. Kenapa, Kak? Sorry.
You can keep it for me
Yes, of course,
until we
Kak.
meet again.
So
Okay.
hopefully in the future you can collaborate with us again in SPE Java. Thank you.
Thank you, Deva. Thank you, SPE.
So probably before we take a photo session, Deva.
Oh yeah, okay. Fanya, can you lead the photo session?
Wait, I will see.
And maybe with the certificate, Mbak Fanya.
Okay, wait. We will take a photo with the memento first. Okay, smile in 3, 2, 1. Okay, next with certificate. Smile in 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Fanya, and also thank you, Mbak Deva and Mbak Sri. So everyone, now we have come to the end of our event today. We have come to the end of Technical Discussion Group Series 2. Maybe you can next the slide, Mbak Deva. Okay, on behalf of the committee and SP Java section, I would like to once again say thank you to Mbak Sri Mulyani for leading this event as the speaker, and also to all the participants who have shown great interest in this topic, and to our sponsors, ExxonMobil, Schlumberger, Premier Oil, BP, and SKK Migas for supporting this event. To all the participants, don't forget to fill the attendance form to get the certificate, and stay tuned to SP Java social media accounts for the upcoming events and become one of SP members to receive all the benefits. Thank you, everyone, and see you in the next events. Thank you, Mbak Sri.
Thank you.
Thank you
Mbak
all.
Sri.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.